And now, live from San Francisco, it's Barbara Simpson on Hot Talk 560, KSFO.
Let's hang out together this afternoon right here on KSFO. I am Barbara Simpson. I am the babe in the bunker. The bunker is KSFO. Our phone number, keep it handy, 808-5600, 808-5600. I saw a movie last night that was absolutely terrific. Now, for those of you who have a thing in your craw about Christianity, there are parts of it you might not care for. But what I found very interesting was you got to look at how our American educational system sort of evolved and how we got to the point where we have schools providing birth control contraceptives, handing out condoms, giving drug counseling, not telling the parents, and even taking children out of school to get abortions. How did that wind up in the schools? They didn't do that when I was in school. They're doing it now, and it's getting worse. How do we get to the point where schools are not allowing kids to wear T-shirts with the American flag on it because it might make somebody very, very unhappy? We know that went on here. How do we get to the point where you can't mention anything about religion or Jesus or Christ or whatever it is that gives you strength if you happen to be the valedictorian of a class? How about that? You know, I mean, there was one instance where a young woman was giving her valedictory speech, and in the middle of it, she made reference to the fact that what got her through and what has been the rock in her life, in fact, was the fact that her religion and Jesus. And they cut her microphone off. They didn't reprimand her afterwards, but they literally pulled the plug on the microphone so that she kept talking and nobody could hear her. So we're trying to make a connection with our guest, Colin Gunn, who is the producer, director, and animator of this film that I saw, touching on a lot of things that have to do with, that I was just mentioning, all these different things that have happened. And they really are happening. And I mentioned this film that I had the opportunity to see last night, and I was mesmerized. I wasn't quite sure what to expect. I urge you to see it. This movie is called IndoctriNation, Public Schools and the Decline of Christianity in America. The man in question that we'll be talking with is Colin Gunn. He's a producer, director, and animator of the film and done a lot of other work. He's an award-winning an accomplished animator. I mentioned his previous films include Shaky Town, winner of the Best Political Film at the San Antonio Independent Christian Film Festival. By the way, with people from all the states, more than 2,000 people there, and people from other countries as well. This is a huge organization. It's a very, very prestigious award. And he also won the Best of Festival award there for his film, The First Blast of the Trumpet Against the Monstrous Regiment of Women. You will tell by his accent, he wasn't born in this country. He was from Hamilton, Scotland. And right now he lives in Texas with his wife and his family. And they decided to do something. And what they did was take a family field trip to take a look at our schools. And he did. And he's on the line with us right now. Colin Gunn, thank you for being with us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on your show.
Your film is terrific. It really is. I wasn't sure what to expect. And I was so impressed, not only with what you discovered, but the way you presented it, and quite frankly, the sequence of history of how the schools in this country developed and the influence of people like Dewey and Horace Mann and all of these other people whose names we may have heard, but we really don't understand what their philosophies were and the impact on what we're dealing with today. And you put it in beautiful perspective. So congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. Our goal is to really show really what goes on in the public schools. A lot of people are deceived and self-deceived about where the origin of all the philosophy comes from. And when we are conservatives, we often want to go back a little bit and look at history. But when we look back, back into the 1800s, we realize that the public school systems, as they were established, were actually established with an anti-Christian and therefore an anti-conservative perspective. And so a lot of these people are socialists, Marxists, utopianists, Darwinists. And so if you're not those things, then you have to be aware that that is the philosophy, a collection of philosophies that we see in the public schools today. So what happened in the 1800s is manifest in the schools right now. The things that are going on, all the terrible things we hear, these things come around as a result of the way the public schools were established.
And, I took, when I was in college, I knew what I wanted to do, and my parents were of a generation that said, well, get your teaching credential because you can always get a job. And finally, to shut them up, I took a minor in secondary education, so I had some experience taking history of education classes and all. And I got to tell you, the things that you brought out in your film were not taught to me in those classes. They didn't go into the real source of it. For people who have no idea what I'm talking about, give me sort of a thumbnail on how it got started that there was no religion and all of these other isms in our educational system.
Well, back in the 1800s, the public school system, there was a move to bring in a compulsory education system. And that involved people like Robert Owen, who actually came over from Scotland. He was Welsh, but he lived in Scotland, came over and established the utopian village in Indiana called New Harmony. And they had a vision, and when you study utopianism, one of the key elements of it is to separate children away from the parents. We separate children away from the parents having the old ideology. You can't have a progressive society unless you get the children away. And that was the same for Horace Mann. He had a similar philosophy. He looked at the Prussian model, which is ironic because when we look at the American public schools and the foundation, we realize the actual design of them isn't even particularly American. So there's also looking to Europe, and we borrowed the Prussian model in terms of organization. Of course, through the 1800s, there were several other ideologies that came onto the scene: Darwinism and obviously Marxism. One of the key points of Marx was the 10th plank of the Communist Manifesto was free public education for all. And so this system that we have, when we actually look at it, it's not really that great a system. It's actually antithetical to a lot of the values that Americans hold to, including ideas of liberty and freedom and prosperity. The public schools were established with a utopian and socialist vision in mind. And then, of course, came Dewey and a lot of the experimental scientists who viewed the child not as a creature creating God's image, but rather as this machine that was to be programmed. And, of course, that led to a whole host of different philosophers coming in and playing on the mind of the child, which is very different than what we want. And one of our themes in the film, and one of the things we want to say, is what you think you're getting in the public schools is not what you want or what you think you're getting. And so our film is designed to warn parents what is really going on in the schools.
What do American parents think they're getting in the schools for the kids?
Well, when someone drops their kids off at the school, they assume too much. They assume that someone is there to love their child, to take care of their child, and to educate their child. And what we find is that the public schools don't do any of those things. And that's the saddest thing you can imagine. A lot of parents are deceived to think that this is a good option for them. And what really happens to their child is they're indoctrinated against the values of their parents. They're taught socialism. They're taught homosexuality. They're taught environmentalism and a whole host of isms that the parents don't even learn that the children know until it's too late, until the children are eventually very different than their parents. And in our film, we're primarily talking about Christians, and we're looking at why Christians are walking away from the faith of their parents. Mm-hmm. And it's largely because the main theme of education in America is a humanistic religion, and it avoids the teaching people about God and instructing them in the Ten Commandments and all the things that their parents would maybe hope that they would preserve in their lives. I'm
curious about the reaction, Colin, and if you're just joining us here on KSFO, I'm speaking with Colin Gunn, who is the producer of this terrific film, IndoctriNation, public schools and the decline of Christianity in America. In terms of the students and what they're learning, it's not only Christian students who are affected by this. It's any student going to the public schools, regardless of their background. And what kind of reaction have you gotten from, if you will, non-Christian audiences? I can see the appeal for Christian audiences because it's very close to their heart. What about non-Christians?
Well, we get the similar perspective. They're very disappointed in the public schools, and we're offering a solution, and ours is focused on faith, but there's also the other issues of academic failure in the public schools. Of course, the public schools are a monopoly, and they fail in the way most government monopolies fail. They offer the most expensive product, and it's the least amount of quality. So that's what we have. So non-Christians do respond in a similar way. They agree with us that there's a significant problem, and our film is designed to encourage those to look at an alternative. And one of the alternatives, and the one I do, is homeschooling. You bypass all this government mess that's being created, and you bring them home and you educate them yourself, and whatever your values are, they will be reflected in your child and your children because you're teaching them, and that's a great privilege and liberty that we have in America. That this country, it's a relatively easy thing to homeschool.
Yeah, I was interested a number of years ago when I was living in Southern California. I belonged to the Junior Women's Club, and I was somehow or other I wound up being their Americanism chairman, and we had an essay contest, an Americanism essay contest that we wanted to be open to junior high kids. And there was a junior high school for our area. There was also a Catholic school in town that didn't have a junior high per se. They went up through 8th grade. And so my thought was that their 7th and 8th graders should be part of the competition for this essay contest we were having. And we invited them, and they said yes. Well, when the principal of the public junior high found out that the Catholic school was going to be part of it, they refused to be part of the competition. They would not allow their children to be part of it. And that was a really sort of a kick in the face for me to realize what was going on. You know, you hear about these things. They didn't want the competition because, quite frankly, they knew the Catholic kids would do a better job than the kids from the Catholic school would do a better job than the public school kids. So the quality of the education is certainly important.
Yeah, what we're seeing great results in homeschooling, but primarily it's not so much about academics, although that is a fruit of the labors of those that are homeschooling. What we're seeing, though, is that the children are protected from a lot of the harmful things. In California schools, we've just got so many problems with, pornography, sexual activity, smoking, alcohol. All these things are there in the school, and they're the things you want to protect your children from. Really, there's no one in the schools that shares your desire to protect your children from all of those things. So it's such an encouragement. We see these young minds preserved and kept pure away from all these harmful elements in the public schools.
Tell me about how you got the idea to do the film, and tell me about this school bus, because I think that your kids could write a book about the trip that they took. I wish I could have gone with you. How did you get the idea, and how did you pull it off? Tell the audience what you did.
Well, I'm a bit of an outsider. I'm from Scotland, so I was blessed to marry a Texan and move over in '99. And one of the striking symbols in American culture is the big yellow bus. You're all used to them, but for us, this is a new. For me, it was a new symbol. Mm-hmm. And of course, the surprising thing is it's coast to coast. Every state you're in has this big yellow bus, almost like you go to a communist country and everyone's wearing the same clothes that are issued by the government. That's the surprising thing, so representative of the schools themselves. So we decided that's a perfect element for an antagonist in a movie. As you make movies, you have the hero and then you have the enemy. Well, we decided that the enemy for us would be the
big yellow bus.
The big yellow bus. And so we actually got an old yellow bus from Craigslist, and we all jumped in it. 7 kids at the time. I'm now of 8, and my wife jumped in the bus, and we drove all across America to visit the sites and to visit the people who were able to talk to this. And it's not just an opinion piece. It's not just punditry. We went and visited with real teachers in the schools, elementary school teachers. We visited with John Taylor Gatto, who's Teacher of the Year in New York State and New York City. Well, these are people that are whistleblowers. They know what happens in the schools, and they come out and speak about it and tell the truth about what goes on. So that's what we saw We had expert witnesses as well, like Samuel Blumenfeld and Ken Ham, who speak on specific subjects. So that was our goal. And the intent of the film is really for a heart for the children of America. We're not doing it. We're not thinking we're better because we homeschool. We really have a heart for those that are deceived into another 4,000 miles on it. And it broke down 4 times and with wheels, the tires bursting and all the rest of it. Quite an adventure for the young ones in this bus. But it really was a worthwhile adventure. And of course, I won't spoil the ending. Like in all good films, the bad guy gets it in the end. So
and he did.
Really
I loved that and how you said that if you weren't pushing any type of destruction on anybody, but if you want to do it yourself on your own property, go ahead. Now,
right.
You're going to have to see the movie to find out what we're talking about. Now you traveled. You started out from Texas, from Waco is where you live, right?
That's right.
And then how did you decide where you were going to go? Because I found your collection of people that you talked to fascinating, and it's it's like 12 or 14 states you went to. So I mean, it wasn't just you went to one place and talked to 10 people and that was it.
That's right. So it was a 3-week tour, and most of that is just navigating to meet people, to interview them, as well as to find the relevant sites. Of course, we had to go to Boston, where they established compulsory education with Horace Mann, and we went to Dayton, Tennessee as well, the Scopes Monkey Trial, and New Harmony. So all these places popped up on our list. But then, of course, some of the people as well that we knew we had to interview that just came to us. In fact, as we were producing the film and people heard about it, they were coming to us. And one of the people that came to us was Brian Rohrbaugh, who has this incredibly powerful testimony in the film about losing his son at Columbine.
Oh, I tell you, that had me in tears. This was one of the fathers who lost a child at Columbine, and he talked about the fact of what happened and recounted it. But what really just got my tears going was at the end when he said that, he wanted to do the best for his son and sent him to school, even though he knew there were problems in schools in general, not obviously the shooting, but there were problems in general.
Subjecting yourself, you subject your kids to the peer pressure, to damage, whether it is violence, sexual assaults, all these things that are going on in the schools right now, bullying being a big part of what we're hearing about in popular culture. There's all these significant things, and the parents have to understand they bear that responsibility. That's why Brian's testimony is so important. He says as much as the murderers were responsible, he bears that responsibility because he put his child in that environment, knowing the risks and knowing the philosophy there in the school.
I have to ask you one question. Why didn't you go to California? I mean, you could have gotten examples of everything in California.
Well, that would have added a whole load of miles to our bus. I don't know if we'd even have made it. I think we'd have made it halfway through Nevada. We were in I lived in California for a while in Castro Valley, and I love the Bay Area, and so I have a lot of friends here, and this is why we're doing this tour, this little mini tour of Northern California right now. So we're meeting up with friends and showing at churches, and we have them listed, all the sites listed on IndoctriNationMovie.com. So if you're in this area in Northern California, you can come out.
Well,
meet me.
That's where our audience is. We're in San Francisco for the program, but we've got thousands of people listening all over here. And that's one thing. Before we end this, I want to go over that again. If people want to meet you and or see the film and or buy a copy, because I can think of about 6 people I'd love to send a copy to and have them see it because it's so important. I really think it's incredibly important. Go ahead.
We believe that we're dependent upon the community, conservative community, to be that grassroots. We can't do a big advertising campaign. We just don't have the budget. This is a small documentary, but what it serves is that everybody knows somebody that needs to see this film. This is the film, it's the hand grenade you throw in the room and leave. Bringing up, telling people what to do with their kids is how to lose a friend.
Yeah.
So this film, we'll take the flak for you. Give them our DVD, let them watch it, and talk it over with them, because we've designed this film with a real love for those people that are still in the public schools but just need to learn these facts. And this is an opportunity for Christians and conservatives to go and put this DVD into their friends' hands or their relatives,
Well, and every day when I look at the news and the internet and I see all the stories from the schools and the caliber of the education keeps going down, certainly in California and in other states, we keep pouring money in. and not getting the results that we should, it's like a black hole. If something's wrong, just give us more money and we'll make it better. And of course, that's not the way it works.
No, the government is always going to ask for more money. We have a scene in the film where Obama's just asking for more and more money, and you have Arnie Duncan asking for more and more time with your child. So they're extending the school day.
I want to talk about Arnie Duncan, so I'm going to put you on hold for just a second. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll find out about the man, Arnie Duncan. I'm Barbara Simpson on KSFO.
You're listening to Barbara Simpson on Hot Talk 560 KSFO.
Barbara Simpson right here at Hot Talk 560 KSFO 808-5600, and we're talking with my guest this hour, Colin Gunn. He is a producer and director of the film that we're talking about, IndoctriNation, Public Schools and the Decline of Christianity in America. We're talking about Brian Rohrbaugh, whose son Dan was one of the youngsters killed in the Columbine shooting in 1999. Gosh, it was that long ago. And he said, "It may have taken a school shooting to wake me up to see the dangers, but that's a very small danger compared to all the other things that go on that can destroy our children." He's talking about what's going on in the schools, and it's going on in all of your schools. Colin, the thing that I found interesting was that the people who go to good schools tend to think that their schools are terrific and all that bad stuff happens in the other schools. And the truth is, it's happening in every school, isn't it?
Right. People are wishful thinkers, and statistically, everyone rates their own school higher than the rest of the schools in the nation. Of course, that can't be possible. So there's this desire to think that their school is better. And I think it's a form of self-deception where they convince themselves that it is okay. The stories that they hear about, we hear, oh, not our teacher, not our school. And of course, the sadness of Columbine is that it was a good school in a good area. And we interview a young woman who went to one of the top schools in America, top 200 public schools, and she just testifies to all the stuff that she saw, guns and drugs and sex and violence. They're there in the schools, and then philosophically, it is a top-down institution run by a Department of Education that has all these philosophies that conservatives would oppose, and it filters down even into the classroom, and it comes through the colleges as well. So the teachers are there learning psychology that is damaging, and all these things are unavoidable. And the thing is, you have to admit, if you're a public school parent, is you cannot know what your child is learning. You cannot know what they're learning on the playground as much as in the classroom.
Exactly.
You really encourage people to know that. Yeah.
And you also don't know what the teachers tell the kids not to tell mommy and daddy, which I know that also goes on. You mentioned the one young lady that you talked to who went to a very good school. That was Lucy, as I recall. And she had, she was talking about what she learned and what she saw in 4th and 5th grade. So we're not just talking high school, which is bad enough, but we're talking about it into the lower grades. I was fascinated and, I must admit, appalled with the way they were setting up little kids. I don't know what grade they were, but they looked like they were probably 1st or 2nd graders to accept gay marriage and homosexuality. And I do know that it is part of even what we're doing in California, is that this education starts as young as kindergarten.
Right. The strategy is values modification, and this has been going on for decades in the public schools, where they get young children and they make them just question the values of their parents. They don't do it overtly in propaganda. They don't send the literature home, but they have someone in the class that just perverts the mindset of the child and introduces them to ideas. And so it's not surprising when you poll young people that they're much more pro-homosexual marriage than their parents are. Mm-hmm. Because generationally, if they've captured your children, they've captured the future, and they're able to get in whatever they want. So the powerhouse of liberalism in America is the public school system. And so if you submit your child to that, you can expect that they will come home with these ideologies.
You showed at one point, you were sitting with one of the men that you had interviewed, and there were lollipops, or at least something that looked like a lollipop, but actually, it had the stick and it had a condom in the package, and it was stamped Planned Parenthood. And these are made available to children in elementary school.
So that is a part of the access that people have to your child once you surrender them to the school bus. There's a host of people that have their own interests in mind. And this is the problem of submitting to the public schools. Your interests aren't shared with the public schools. They have their own agenda, and that agenda could be anything, but what's happened is they're opened up to organizations like Planned Parenthood who really do actively pursue children within the public schools to teach them about abortion rights and have condoms available even to very young people, and introduce them to the subject of sexuality before they're even ready for it. So this is part of the propaganda.
And they don't even know what it is, but they're introduced to it. Let's see. Steve is on the line with a question for you. He's calling from Walnut Creek. Steve, go ahead with a question here on KSFO with my guest, Colin Gunn, and I'm Barbara Simpson. Go ahead.
Great, Barbara. Thank you, Colin. Actually, a quick comment about Arnie Duncan. He and people like him have done a huge amount of damage to our schools because they have an agenda that is other than education, and
we will talk. We'll talk more about that. But what was your question specifically?
Well, my comment, something I've noticed I've thought I think a lot of the people in the education systems and so-called educators nowadays, they've been brought up. They were educated in this same system. Mm-hmm. I wanted to get your Colin's read on that. I mean, how much of an effect do you think
that's a very good point. Thank you for that. Take your answer on the air, if you would. Colin's truth. The teachers are the product of the same system, so they may be very nice people and well-intentioned, but it doesn't mean they know what they're really doing.
No, they're we have this problem in America where we trust licensed professionals a little bit too much, and so we assume that those that bear the name teacher are qualified to be there, whereas a lot of them, they are nice people, and there's good people in the public schools right now, but they're not. Some of them aren't even good at the subject they're teaching.
Well, that's something else.
That's something else. There's people that have gone through the public school system themselves. They've accepted fully the concept, and they can't think of any alternative. And so they're not going to teach your child the values. So they're not good on liberty issues, their status essentially, because they're paid for ultimately by the government themselves. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing people that, I often argue as a homeschooler, the best qualified person to train your child is you, because you're the one that loves them more than anyone else, and that's the way that God has intended for you to be the pioneer in that person's future. And so you cannot pay someone to have that vested interest in your child, and as hard as some of the teachers work, it really is up to the parents to be the ones that are responsible for helping their child educationally.
Yeah, and and unfortunately the system is stacked against the parents, because the truth is they really don't want the parents to get involved. You're a pain in the neck if you come in and question anything they're doing. I mean, I had that, and as a matter of fact, with my youngest child, I took her out of public schools. Finally, I put her in a parochial school because I saw what they were doing to her, and it was outrageous. And these were top schools, by the way.
I know one of the things about California, which is interesting, is that it's 46 now in terms of reading proficiency. 46? 46.
Oh my gosh!
Proficiency in the 4th grade, and it's some of the highest paid teachers in the country.
Wow!
And so that should upset a lot of people, and that's the way these systems work. When there's no free market, where there's no choice, there's just this system where people, and the unions, of course, are a huge part of this.
Sure.
People that aren't qualified to teach and stay there perpetually and get paid for the full term of their whole existence.
Well, I always said that the only way, in California at least, that you could get a teacher fired would be if the teacher raped the principal's daughter on the front lawn and everybody saw it. And even then, I'm not sure they would fire the person. But it's almost that bad, where the bad teachers, as I have seen from my experience in this area, is that they simply move them around. I mean, they criticize the Catholic Church about moving priests around. Well, I got to tell you something. The public schools do that all the time. We'll take one more quick break, and we will be right back as we continue my conversation, and we'll find out who Arnie Duncan is and what that's all about. I'm talking with my guest, Colin Gunn, the producer of IndoctriNation, Public Schools and the Decline of Christianity in America.
You're listening to Barbara Simpson on Hot Talk 560 KSFO.
Babe in the Bunker here with you, Barbara Simpson on Hot Talk 560 KSFO 808-5600. We're talking with my guest, producer of the film, actually the star of the film too, with his family, Colin Gunn and the producer of the film, also with him, Joaquin Fernandez, and just a whole crew of terrific people who came up with a wonderful film. The website is IndoctriNationMovie.com, IndoctriNationMovie.com. And I suggest that you take a look at it and certainly find out. We'll find out also where he'll be here in Northern California, because he's sort of in the area today, and I'm looking forward to that. Tell us, if you would, Colin, who's Arnie Duncan?
Well, he's the Secretary of Education, and he's one of the worst ones, and we outline him in the film, particularly because he gives this story, this myth that he can fix education. Of course, his way of doing it is just having your child for longer, and so he goes through a list of all the things he wants you to have your child, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and he even mentions potluck dinners, which is ironic for us, because that's the staple of Christian churches in America, the potluck dinner. And we make this analogy, this is the point for us, that they're trying to make the church one of the most, the public schools, one of the most influential institutions in America. And of course, for me, that would be I would prefer it was the family and the church as the primary institution of our culture.
No question about it. We have the situation with a young lady that you interviewed, Sarah Laverdiere. Is that how she pronounces her name?
Yeah, that's right, Sarah Laverdiere.
Laverdiere. Tell us briefly what happened with Sarah. What an amazing young woman she is.
Well, she's the perfect example of a great teacher. She's smiley, great demeanor. She loved the kids in her classroom, and they all loved her. And she took a stand. We interviewed her in our classroom before we knew what happened. What eventually happened was she resigned, but we interviewed her in our classroom, and she just testified to what goes on in the public school. And a nice teacher often gives parents a confidence to trust the public schools, but what Sarah testified to is it doesn't matter how much nice she is, it's the other teachers are there to influence your child. And she gave an example of another teacher who started influencing a pupil to favor homosexuality. And so as good as she was, it's the other teachers that are involved. And of course, with all the employment, the number of teachers in the schools, you really are open to these authority figures being over your child, teaching them this doctrine, whether they're in your class or not. And also the peers, of course, being a significant part of the direction your child will go. Exactly.
And what happened at the end? She finally, I guess, decided that she couldn't take it anymore and that she wanted to be able to occasionally mention her faith in class. Not that she was going to be converting the kids, but that she just wanted to make it part of the overall. And she was, in essence, forced to resign, not in 2 weeks, but right now, and we'll walk you to your car.
Right, so she's walked out of there like a criminal. They kind of walk her out the back door. The kids were crying. There was this situation where she was treated like she had done something wrong, and she had decided to resign based on her desire to be consistent. So she felt as a Christian, she has to be vocal about her faith, to be able to talk about it in the classroom. And I asked her the question, what would happen if you started to teach Scripture from the front of the classroom? And she said, well, I'd be out of there that day. And of course, we heard later that something like that had happened. Mm-hmm. That she gave her notice, and it's usually 2 weeks. But because of her particular circumstances and to so-called protect the kids, she was pretty much fired that day and asked to leave. So it's a sad story, but there's a hopeful message there. Sarah is doing very well with her first child now and very happy. We're seeing teachers leave the system based on this. They're not given the liberty that they want. They can't even teach the way they want. And that's the example of John Taylor Gatto, who talks about he fought against the school system because of the way that he really wanted to teach. He was getting the results, but was getting into trouble. Because he did it his way, a New York teacher in the toughest schools in New York City, dealing with not predominantly, but probably predominantly minority kids coming from bad backgrounds. And these kids were thriving, and the system hated him for it. That's right. They don't appreciate results. Yeah, no, not if it makes them look bad. That's the thing. Orlene is on the phone. Orlene, a quick question for my guest. Orlene is calling from Santa Rosa. Go ahead, please.
I'm so glad that you were discussing this, and I look forward to seeing that movie. It sounds wonderful. My question was, I lost one of my 5 sons to his basic belief in God because of the indoctrination he had over countless years, and we didn't even know what was going on. About evolution and the green movement, environmentalism. I wondered if your movie addresses those issues as well.
Good. Take your answer on the air. Go ahead, Colin.
Oh, absolutely. That's really the prime issue, the prime reason that we made this film, is to warn parents about this philosophy, Darwinism, which is a philosophy that can be very harmful, and we see it acted out in Columbine. We went to visit Ken Ham, and we as Christians believe that the Word of God is foundational to our ethical actions, and so to understand creationism, which is the belief that there's a created order, to understand we're made in God's image and there's laws that require us to obey, that's crucial. The Darwinist survival of the fittest notion is played out very clearly in Columbine, where the stronger kill the weaker. And they actually had natural selection written. One of them has natural selection written on their T-shirt as a testimony to their philosophy, which was this philosophy of hate that was spawned from a Darwinistic worldview.
And of course, the effect of environmentalism, which is being taught in the schools, and I found it interesting that the people who are pushing climate change and they're shoving it down our kids' throats in the schools, even though there is controversy over it. They were absolutely outraged a couple of weeks ago when they found out that the Heartland Institute had some materials that would try to get the kids to at least ask questions in the schools. They thought that was outrageous, but their point of view to teach them that it's, gospel, that we've got climate change and it's going to happen no matter what, that was okay. I mean, the double standard was just blatant.
Yeah, your child's open to every fashionable philosophy. And so this is the current trend right now, pushing people towards this environmentalist agenda. And so it's very trendy within the schools, and it's unavoidable. In fact, it's one of the primary ethical positions that the public school does hold. Recycling and all of these things are the primary ethics, and this is a different worldview, a different perspective. No question. Are they doing it? Do you find that all the states are doing pretty much the same thing? I mean, you went to, I think, is it 12 or 14 states overall? Yes, I'm finding that because there's a top-down system, because there's a Department of Education that influences every state, there's differences. There's definitely better schools than others, but really what we're seeing is all those problems are there, even in the good schools. And culturally, that's because, you see culture has changed negatively for the worse with the social media and promiscuity and all those things that are going to be there in the schools. And your child will be influenced often by some of the worst peer pressure and the worst families that you just would not have in your home, but they're there in the public schools influencing your child, and it's inescapable when you're not there to supervise it. Thank you very, very much, and my congratulations. When I was reading the credits to your movie, I mean, it was just huge, a lot of volunteers, and apparently families that you stayed with across the country, and the work that was done. It really is just terrific, and I commend you on it, and everybody who worked with you on it. It needs to get lots and lots and lots of eyes to see it and talk about it, because there's a lot there that needs to be changed. And thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it. My pleasure. Thank you for having me on your show. You're welcome. And again, his name is Colin, C-O-L-I-N, last name Gunn, G-U-N-N. The film is IndoctriNation, and it's IndoctriNation. Nation is being indoctrinated. You get it? Public schools and the decline of Christianity in America. The website is IndoctrinationMovie.com. I really would urge you to try to see it. There's a trailer that you can see. It's well worth seeing. Look at where we're going. Look at what is happening to this country. It comes from people who are products of the system. And the system is the school system. It's what they teach and what they don't teach. It's what they leave out. And as I said, I took education classes in college. And I knew about John Dewey, and I knew about Horace Mann. I thought I knew. But when he laid it out in that movie last night in a wonderful way, there was animation. There were it was very, very well done, very entertaining and sobering. And when you saw that father from Columbine, it would just bring you to tears. But then you looked at the young teacher, and Sarah, and she got fired simply because she was going to resign. And they were afraid that they might find out that why she was resigning, so they wouldn't accept her letter of resignation. And they literally walked her out and brought the kids to the back playground so that they wouldn't see her leaving. It's in your schools. I expect something like that from Soviet Russia or Nazi Germany or China, for God's sake.
The United States? Now? Yes. Those are the tactics. They're teaching them. They're getting away with it. They know that the kids will tell the parents, and they ignore the parents. I'm Barbara Simpson.